Well, first of all, good morning, everyone. It's lovely to have the opportunity to chat with you here this morning. My name is Kenny Windsor. I'm the Academic Director of Admissions for the RCSI. And again, I'd like to to welcome you all and wish you all a very safe and a happy 2022. Now, you're probably watching this morning because you may be interested in making an application to one of our programs here at RCSI. And if you think about it, in very simple terms, the first opportunity that the admissions team or the admissions committee and selection committee will have to interact with you or to get information about you is really through your application. Now, over many years, myself and my colleagues, I've seen some absolutely outstanding applications, and they tend to be successful. But I've also seen applications which tend to be unsuccessful because they stand out in slightly different ways. Now, as I travel around schools in many different parts of the world, talking to various students about potential applications, I often use a very simple phrase and say, look, for all of the successful applications that I've seen in my life, you can probably use three words to describe why they're successful. And the first of those words is preparation. The second of those words is preparation. And you're probably going to guess now that the third of those words is also preparation. So it's all about putting time and investing time into your application to maximize your chances of success. Now, sorry, let me just scan through. Well, I beg your pardon. So if you look at the RCSI application, if you're applying as an international student, it's a very straightforward process. There's a lot of housekeeping information, name, address, date of birth, and so on. We also require details of your qualifications. So that would be what qualifications you have achieved to date, but also what your predicted or your pending examinations are going to be. We also look for academic referees or references. Now, again, you can submit other references. Just be a little bit careful when you're doing that. I mean, obviously, a lot more weight is put into academic references than, for example, somebody who may have been your babysitter when you were a toddler and so on. So just a little bit of thought into that. But if you think about the application process, really one of the areas where you can actually show your personality is in your personal statement. So it's worth investing time and effort into preparing your personal statements. Now, again, I've seen many thousands of personal statements over many years. Many of them will stand out and some of them don't stand out. But for me, the ones that stand out the most are those ones which are truly personal statements. And let me just explain what I mean by that. For our personal statements, that we require a maximum of 2 pages with double line spacing throughout. Now, you can put a number of things into your personal statement, something about your motivation, commitment, communication, your achievements, your leadership skills, voluntary work, and so on. But you can also submit those as part of your CV. So you don't necessarily need to include all of those things. However, what really piques my attention when I'm reading personal statements are those personal statements which are personal to your application to this particular university. So what I mean by that is it could be something like, well, the reason I'm applying to RCSI is because, or the reason that I'm interested in a profession or a career in this area or any one of these areas is because. So make it very personal. Now, many people have said to me in the past, well, if I'm submitting UCAS applications, for example, for UK universities, can I just submit the same personal statement? And my answer is, well, yeah, I mean, you can submit whatever you like, but what will really stand out is something which has been really drafted unique for this particular application. That's what I mean by a personal statement. It goes without saying, obviously don't plagiarize. I mean, again, you can buy personal statements online. They mean nothing, and they stand out like a sore thumb. But in your personal statement, it's important that you be authentic, that you actually show your particular personality. I've had personal statements in the past where students have got the name of the university wrong, or they've submitted a personal statement that they were submitting to some other university course. That really doesn't impress me, and I don't think it would impress any admissions committee. The other thing I will say to you is, before you submit your personal statement, use your spell checker, your grammar checker, and all these very, very simple tools that you have available to you. Again, nothing is as unimpressive as a poorly constructed personal statement. So, simple message here is, if you're going to write a personal statement, make it a personal statement. In terms of the criteria for interview, if you think about any admissions process, the personal statement is one where you can put your personality into your application. But the second area where you can actually shine in terms of showing who you are is if you're called for interview. Now, our application process, our selection process, is a very, very holistic process. We obviously look at your subject requirements. We look at your final 2 years of high school performance. Now, some people will say, well, if I did O levels, do we look at those? We look at them because they usually are a good indicator as to how somebody might perform in terms of their A levels, if that's what they're doing, or their IB, or whatever it might be. But we really put our focus on the final 2 years of your high school performances. Academic references are something which are very, very important to us. We also do read your personal statements. And as I said a few seconds ago, it's the ones that really stand out, which sort of put you up at that higher level or higher chance of being called for interview. We also look at your extracurricular activities. Do you need to be a superstar on the sports field? No, you don't. We're just looking for evidence for someone who is actually going to be involved, who should be well balanced, well rounded, and so on. So that's really how we select people for interview. But again, my mantra, my message to you is, if you're called for interview, it's your one big shot. So it's all about being prepared. And again, I've had many interviews, or I've interviewed many students over the years. Those that really stand out are the people that have prepared for interview. You would be shocked and amazed at the number of people who've turned up for interview, and when you ask them, have they looked at the website, or what do they know about the school or the university? Absolutely nothing. Now, if I were going to invest a significant amount of money in a car or a home or whatever, I'd certainly read the brochure. So if you are invited for interview, it's all about preparation. Think about it. It's not rocket science. Certainly, if I were interviewing you, there are some things that I'm absolutely going to ask you. Why do you want to be a doctor or a pharmacist? Why have you applied to this school? And so on. So these are things that you can prepare in advance, and it's all about preparation. Just in terms of our interviews, we tend to interview from late February through to April. All of our interviews, obviously with the COVID situation, are online. Now, the interviews will be either live face-to-face interviews or recorded interviews. I'll say a little bit more about that in the next slide. But remember, our interviews are actually quite informal. What we're trying to assess is you as a person, and whether we feel that you would be a good fit for our programs, and secondly, whether we think that we would be a good fit for you. So it's all about being yourself. We're interested in you and what motivates you for this career, but we're also very interested to see that you've taken some steps to actually convince yourself that this is the right course for you and the right career for you. So really what we're trying to assess in the interview is, what insight have you gained? Have you shadowed a doctor or a pharmacist or a physiotherapist? Have you spoken to some students to see what's actually involved? Remember, our interviews are not technical. We're not going to ask you about your medical knowledge. We're not going to ask you about your chemistry or your physics or your biology, because that's what your A levels or your IB or your education system will actually test. So it's really a conversation more than a formal test. But again, it's all about preparation, and it really is the clincher as to whether you will be successful or not in securing an offer. Some of our interviews are delivered over Zoom, so they will be face-to-face where you will actually interact. Normally, we have only 1 or 2 interviewers. In some locations, we use a video recording system on a platform called Sonru. So with those, if you're invited for a Sonru interview, you can practice. We send you all of the various links. It's like setting yourself up on Skype and so on, but then you can practice some of the test questions. And then when you're ready for the real interview, you simply press go. The questions come up on your screen. You simply record your answers, and those answers are then reviewed along with your full file, personal statement, references, transcripts, and so on. So both of those are fairly simple processes, but again, it's all about preparation. So I'm going to stop at that point, but I'm more than happy to take any questions if anybody would like to ask me specifically. And I know my colleagues here are also online, and we'll happily address any questions that you might have. But listen, thank you for listening to me this morning. And if you do decide that you're going to make an application, I just wish you the very, very best of luck.
Thanks, Kenny. That's brilliant. Listen, just in the meantime, hopefully some of you, because we have over 70 people at this session, so hopefully a few of you might have a few questions about personal statements and the admissions interview process before we wrap up at 11 this morning. So please do send in those questions through the chat box. But Kenny, just to get the ball rolling, how important is the personal statement as part of the online application? Like, is it the most important part of it, or, you know, can you maybe give...
I don't think it's necessarily the most important part, Liz, but it certainly should not be underestimated, because I think with people who write personal statements, what it really does is it gives us some insight into what's motivating them, what's driving them, why they might be applying to RCSI. So it's one of those things that can take you to a higher level of competitiveness.
Yeah.
And again, it's one of those things that I think you can very clearly see that if somebody has put effort into their personal statement, that they've really put a lot more effort into the whole of their application. So it just gives us an indication of how serious an applicant is about securing a place within any one of our programs.
Perfect. So somebody here has asked, how long is the interview?
Our interviews normally are a maximum of about 30 minutes. So what we would normally do is we give you an opportunity at the end to also ask some questions. So we might talk to you for around 20 minutes or so, and then give you an opportunity at the end to raise anything that perhaps you feel that we didn't discuss with you as part of your application, or that you feel that you would like to raise specifically. So in total is probably 25 to 30 minutes.
Perfect. There's a question around resources to help you preparing for an interview. That might be a bit of a longer one. So I might just, there's another question around, are there any admissions tests that Singaporean students are required to take?
No, we don't have. For international applicants, if you're applying as an EU candidate, you do have to do standardized tests as you would have in the UK. But for us, if you're applying as an international candidate, we don't have any specific admissions tests. It's simply based on those criteria that I mentioned previously: your education, your references, your interview, personal statement, extracurriculars, and so on.
Yeah. Is there any regulations around the font size for our personal statement other than double spacing?
No, again, it would be fairly standard. We would probably recommend that you use something around a font size of a 12, and some of basically the standard fonts. So all of those that you would use for generating essays and the things you would do as part of your schoolwork.
Yeah.
So we don't have a specific requirement for that.
Yeah. So something like Arial or Calibri, something kind of standard would be fine. So Cynthia, yeah, exactly. Another question I wanted to ask, if we're required to submit a CV or a resume along with a personal statement, is that why we don't need to mention our work experience again in the personal statement?
Again, Liz, you can submit a lot of supporting documentation to complement your application. So most people would actually put a CV in there as well. And I would certainly recommend that you do that. I mean, the personal statement, we try to restrict that to 2 pages and double line spacing. So obviously there are lots of students or lots of applicants who have done a whole range of other things. And it wouldn't be possible to include all of that within a personal statement and still make the personal statement a personal statement.
Yeah.
So we would encourage people to actually submit a short resume or a CV, simply outlining what their achievements or their skills and experiences might be.
Perfect. So another person is wondering, how would the personal statement compare with other application personal essays, such as ones on Common App in the US, and probably similar to the UCAS kind of personal statement as well?
Well, as I said, Liz, I mean, yes, a lot of people will say, can I submit the personal statement that I submitted with my UCAS application? And the answer is you can do that. But as I said, I think the key thing is, if you're thinking about making an application for any one of these very competitive professional programs like medicine and pharmacy, there's nothing to stop you starting your preparation perhaps a year in advance. You know, so you could be thinking about this then. And all I'm saying here is that a lot of personal statements that are simply submitted are generic. And they don't stand out. They don't give you that, in my opinion, they don't give you that extra edge. What really piques my interest is somebody that has taken the time to actually make their personal statement personal to that particular application. So that's what I'm saying. You can be doing that well in advance. Don't leave that right to the very, very end. And it's just those ones that sort of stand out above the rest.
Yeah. Perfect. Somebody has just emailed in to say that when they submitted their application, they submitted the wrong copy of their resume. So just email Catherine Maloney at admissions. So cmaloney@rcsi.ie, and that would be fine with that one. Okay, next question. How do we submit a CV or resume as part of the application process? That's on the online application portal. So you apply online through the website, and there will be a section where you can upload your CV, your additional documentation. If you are in the middle of the application process and you have any questions around that, you should check in directly with the admissions officer, Catherine Maloney, on that. So is it a panel interview?
No, as I mentioned, Liz, on one of those slides, the interview will normally take place with 1 or 2 people. We try to usually use a group of 2, but obviously because sometimes that's just not possible. So it could be a one-on-one interview or a 2-on-1, but it's not like the many multiple interviews that you might experience in some other application processes. It's really meant to be an informal and a more relaxed style, because what we're trying to establish is really you as a person, rather than intimidate you or make you feel anxious or nervous. So it's a fairly relaxed style of interview.
Yeah. Somebody else is asking, is it necessary to write a CV if they already mentioned their work experience and extracurriculars in the personal statement?
No, it's not. It's not a requirement that you have to submit a CV, but I would always suggest that it's something that you should possibly consider. Because again, it gives us an overview of some of the things that you've been involved in that it just may not be easy to include within a personal statement. It's not a requirement.
Yeah, perfect. Another question, how much do you value a grade or a GPA in a course compared to extracurricular activities or work experience or leadership or other personal experiences?
Again, Liz, we look at
Yeah.
the whole application. It's not a simple question to ask.
Yeah.
Obviously, you have to meet the minimum academic requirements. So that's a given, all right? And those are published on our website and within our documentation. But what we look for are, as I mentioned earlier on, we try to look for people who are well-balanced and well-rounded. So people who have demonstrated that they have been involved in other activities. We're looking for people who will not only excel academically, but will also contribute to the wider college life through participation in things like clubs and societies. So we look for evidence of that. And as I mentioned, you don't have to be a star athlete. It's just somebody who's going to contribute and be involved in the wider college life, in addition to meeting the minimum academic requirements.
Yeah, perfect. We have loads of questions left. So what I would say to everybody is, if we don't get a chance to answer your questions today, please do send them into admissions@rcsi.ie and we'll get back to you in the next couple of days before the end of the week. So a question here that I just want to raise, just so that there's no confusion: is the HPAT applicable to international students? No, but I suppose international, it depends on what you mean by international. Like if you're European and you're applying through the CAO system for medicine, then HPAT is applicable. But if you're non-EU, which is really what this session is for, because this is for students who are applying as a non-EU student and applying through the website, doing an online application, then there are no admissions tests. As Kenny has outlined, there's the online application, which includes the personal statement. And then if you are deemed competitive after a review of your online application, you're invited to interview, and that's the application process, just to make sure that nobody is thinking that the HPAT is applicable. It's not applicable if you're non-EU. So we've 2 minutes left, Kenny, so I'll try to get to one or two questions before we wrap up. Besides preparation, is there anything else to do to stand out in an interview?
Well, I mean, I think the key thing is you got to be yourself and you got to be honest. I mean, I've interviewed many people and you've been involved in some of these processes as well. And what we're really trying to assess is the individual candidate. So be honest about who you are and what motivates you, rather than say what you think the interviewer wants to hear. I think that's really, really important, because that always makes you a little sort of red light shine on top of your head over other candidates. Is if you're actually just being yourself and you've prepared. Yeah,
so just be authentic, really, because it's more
absolutely important.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. And this is kind of a similar question. I'm wondering if there's something we should strictly avoid mentioning in personal statements or interviews.
Well, again, Liz, obviously there's lots of things. I mean, there's protocols around this sort of thing about being politically correct and so on. Yes. So obviously nothing is going to be offensive to anyone. But in essence, no, I mean, personal statements can really cover many, many different areas, and they can take particular slants. And that's what I mean. I know I keep harping back to it, but that's what I mean about being a personal statement. It should be something personal to you and your particular application, but it's all about just being honest.
It is, yeah. But at the end of the day, there's just a few questions kind of coming in about should they have emotional reasons as well as logical reasons, and I think that's completely appropriate. It's just it's still a professional document at the end of the day, though. It's still an application to get into to medical school or to study. So I think it's probably slightly different to writing an essay, but I don't see any reason why you wouldn't include emotive reasons for wanting to do the course. It doesn't have to be just logical. Yeah, okay, that's fine.
Totally, Liz, yeah, totally agree with you.
Okay, so any last words of wisdom, Kenny, before we wrap up, for everybody who's here this morning about preparing for the non-EU application, specifically with regard to personal statements and interviews?
Again, Liz, what I said at the very beginning, for me, I think it's all about preparation preparation and more preparation, because applications which are very hastily put together, they stand out. They really stand out for all of the wrong reasons. And it's those applications where you can see that people have put thought into them, they've put time into them, they've prepared them well in advance. They tend to be the more successful. So I would just continue on with preparation. Get yourselves organized very early on. I remember a colleague of mine, Liz, and you would remember her as well. And she said, words of wisdom were, get yourself, if you're thinking about applying for one of these professional courses, get yourself a big notebook and start making notes a year, 2 years in advance even, and just start working out when are the closing dates, when are the times, what type of interviews do they operate, and document all of these things so that you know that you're not going to slide through any of these timelines. Don't miss them, and make sure that your applications are complete.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Kenny. Thanks very much for your time. And hopefully everybody who joined us this morning found that useful. Please do check out our website for more information about the application process, and send us an email at admissions@rcsi.ie. But for now, take care and enjoy the rest of the open day. Thank you.